Look, I get it. We all knee deep in summertime shy right now, but hey, winter is coming. I'm talking about the cold, the wind, the frost, the polar vortex. And you definitely want to make sure the windows on your crib hold up. That's where Window Nation comes in. This month, get 50% off all window styles. Window Nation offers a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. Schedule a fast, free estimate now with Window Nation. Call 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. You remember that amazing little cafe you discovered last summer or that perfect hiking spot you heard about? Well, with the Overlook mobile app, you can create personal lists of places you've been, want to go, and always see everything on a map. Share your favorite hidden gems with friends and family. Or, keep your secret spots private for you. The best part, no ads cluttering your list and no one selling your interests or travel data. All you got to do is download the free app at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/Chicago to see some of our personal favorite CityCast lists on a map and in your pocket. Overlookmaps.com. Collect and share the places that matter to you. Today on CityCast Chicago, we've talked before about how there are just some things you should know when you live here. You can call them essential rules or unwritten rules, and we've got even more for you. It's Thursday, August 7th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. So last year, the team discussed our essential rules for living in Chicago, but now we got some new team members, so we figured we should probably get their rules too for what Chicagoans need to know to understand and make the most of life in the city. I'm joined today by Hey Chicago newsletter editor Emmy Mack. Emmy, welcome back.
Hey Jacoby. Hey Chicago.
I did not even try to rhyme there. You are one of our only guests who says hey, Chicago. And I appreciate you do that. In 4 years, I've never done that. I'm all just hey, everybody.
I'm saying it every day at the start of the newsletter.
Makes sense. We've also got social media manager Rick Homuth in the building. Rick, glad to have you back with us.
Pleasure to be here.
So today, as we have already said, we're going to go through some of the essential rules we gave in our episode last year. We're going to get y'all rules, add them to the list. Now, again, these do not need to be hard and fast. These can be things that you were taught growing up, things that you learned when you moved here, things that just you and your friends observe. But I want to start with this question. How long have you been in Chicago? Rick, I'm going to throw that question to you first.
I moved to Chicago in 2011. So, almost 15 years. So I moved from Kansas City and really kind of never looked back. My dad grew up here in Jefferson Park and, was very unhappy to be living in Kansas. So, ever since I was a kid, he was always obviously watching the Bears and things like that, but just took being a Chicago boy very seriously. And so I think I was kind of raised with that within me. And, I remember even some kids at school would ask me, why do you talk like that? Because I would kind of copy his accent a little bit. And so I don't know, that's kind of weird, but I just knew, growing up, visiting relatives in Chicago for holidays and things like that, I knew I always wanted to be here eventually. So it felt like a spiritual homecoming to the fatherland, if you will.
I love that. I feel like we've had you on a few times, but we've never kind of covered some of that origin. So I'm glad you sharing some of that with us. Emmy, I already know the answer for you, but I'm going to ask anyway. How long have you been in Chicago?
My entire life, for better or worse.
Have you ever considered moving away from Chicago, living somewhere else full time?
I mean, I went to college in New York City, so I guess I spent some time there, and I had a lot of fun there, but I feel like I was talking about Chicago the entire time. So
see, that's the mark of a true Chicagoan. It's one thing to stay here and never leave, but to leave and then come back, that's real love.
That's what I did. I'm now going on 10 years back in the city. I went to school in Peoria for 4 years. Then I went to Syracuse, and I was pretty sure I was going to either go to New York City or DC. But when I think of those 6 years in totality, I spent most of the time talking about Chicago. Syracuse, I came back because I felt like this was the place for me to be. thinking about living in Chicago, whether it's for someone who is moving here, someone who's been here their entire life, my first question is going to be, what is your number one essential rule for living in Chicago? And I want to remind listeners that when Simone, Michelle, and myself did this episode initially, our three rules were: Simone said, learn the grid. I said you should recognize that segregation is in pretty much everything. It's in every chapter of this city's story. And then Michelle said to make sure you have some urban self-awareness, some kindness, the way you move around the city. Rick, what is your essential rule for living in Chicago, or your number one unwritten rule for the city?
So my number one thing is that you've really got to lean into winter. You in this city, you can't merely endure winter. You must learn to thrive, and that means, if you're not willing to go out, run errands, meet friends when it's under 10 degrees or worse, then you're just not going to make it. And on top of that, I want to say something that I think is a little controversial, which is winter in Chicago is not that bad, and frankly, is getting milder every year for better or worse, right? Like the average temperature in November is like 40 degrees. In December, it's closer to 30, but like that's nothing, and you got the holidays stuff, the downtown's lit up, there's plenty going on. It's kind of nice in Chicago in December, if you ask me. Of course, it gets a little harder in January and February. I admit it can get pretty rough then, but to me, the worst part is always in March and April when you assume it's going to get warm and then just stays cold and wet, but without, the insulating warmth and aesthetic compensation, if you will, of snow on the ground. So I think, you got to be able to handle winter. Part of that involves like gearing up, knowing how to layer. You got to get a pair of real winter gloves. It took a while for me to realize that Doc Martens are not winter boots, things like that. Winter is not just some temporary inconvenience that you can just wait out. You got to learn how to live through it.
I love that you say can't just endure, you got to thrive in it. Once I saw like an upstate New York blizzard and the inches and feet of snow they get year over year, once I got back to the city, I was kind of chilling on winter. Like you said, ultimately it isn't that bad. Sure, the polar vortex is probably the worst single day of like frost I've ever experienced in my life. It's it split my lip and the inside of my mouth within like 2 minutes of being outside.
I'm sure that was no fun.
No, that was terrible. But at least right now, when I'm outside, I am taking it for granted. And when I go into a place, I am really impacted by the sudden change from like outside weather to like over air conditioning in a building. I don't know. I feel like when I walk into a building in the winter and it's hot and it's warm, I feel so cozy walking into that building. My body doesn't go through the immediate shock. And every meal I have during the winter out, every play I see, every concert I go to, I feel like I earned it that much more and I enjoy it just a little bit more than I do in any other season. And so it can be difficult, but like I also don't have to endure the worst parts of winter, like driving in the winter, parking in the winter, shoveling snow in the winter. Like most of those things are, I don't like plastering up the windows. Like I don't have to deal with the most annoying parts. And so it ends up being chill for me. How you feel about the winter in the city, Emmy?
I just am immune to it. I stay wearing my outfits. My belly button is out. I have a lot of colorful fur coats. I actually love the excuse to wear them. The most annoying thing about the winter to me is just trying to be a hype man to convince everyone to go places. Because like Rick, I agree that you absolutely have to or you'll go insane. And I just wish more people were on board with that.
Taking us like to the opposite season, what is your essential rule for living in the city?
Yeah, so mine is just always bring a bikini with you during the summer. If you're wearing a little purse, then tie it on the outside strap, because I actually broke this rule last week, ended up at the lake at night, no bikini, had to skinny dip, and trust me, I've told people every time one of my friends
had to skinny dip. I like how you just said that so casually. And
well, what are you going to do? Not get in? I get it.
But, yeah. And I had been talking a whole game to my friends who were visiting, and I was like, trust me, you're going to want to bring your bathing suit every day that we go out. And then I forgot it. So I had to pay the price. And I just want to warn everybody that you don't want to end up naked at North Avenue, but you might.
No, it's a good tip.
As a rule, I have never observed, but I feel like if I did, I would have gotten into the lake at least once or twice. I walk it every week and have not gotten into it at any point during the summer. I would like to think it's just because I don't want to, but maybe it's because I never have a bathing suit.
Exactly.
I know I added segregation is in absolutely everything, but I've been seeing this conversation that I've tried my best to ignore. Y'all have probably seen where people are talking about what are the four major cities in America.
Hmm.
And I'm like, any conversation that doesn't have Chicago, skip. Actually,
Right.
uninterested, blocked. I'll never want to see your content again. But like building on this, like undisputable fact that Chicago is a major city. Chicago is very much a worldly city. We talk about it a lot, but I do think it's something that we end up taking for granted at the end of the day, and we end up allowing our city to really be simplified. And so I want to remind people it is a worldly city, so go experience the world and not just through food. We had an episode recently where we talked about like touring the world through Chicago's food, but I also mean in museums, in parades, just like going into neighborhood corner stores, like small vintage and thrift stores. You can learn so much more about Chicago. And I know again, we could simplify it to like go to the south side, go to the west side. But like Rick, you just did a video recently talking about just like the history of Humboldt Park, where it gets its name from, the different cultures that have moved through there, the different ways that they have stamped. At one point, this was what was our neighborhood, and how those stories have sort of layered on top of one another. I would always just really suggest to people to like dig through the layers of your neighborhood, but also like show up in a neighborhood or a restaurant that you've never visited or never been to, the various countries that are represented in this city. We want to move on to number two. You're going to want to bring your tissues for this fascinating theater pick. Come From Away is at Paramount Theater in Aurora. The show is based on a true story, y'all, of a small town in Newfoundland that took in nearly, get this, 7,000 stranded passengers from over 100 countries after planes were grounded because of the 9/11 attacks. 38 of those planes, international flights, landed in Gander, the town that welcomed the world. Nominated for 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical and Best Original Score, the Chicago area premiere offers a simple message that kindness can and should reach across all borders. Experience the small town generosity. Come From Away runs August 20th through October 12th in downtown Aurora. Don't wait. Get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com. All right, so I want to name a couple qualities. I want you to think if they apply to you, and just maybe I might got your next career move. Ready? I bet. Do you have a passion for people? You're excited to help others and you got great customer service skills. Do you crave flexibility, right? You want to be in charge of your own schedule and chart your own course. Do you got that hustle in you, right? Are you ready to turn that drive into something meaningful? All right, if you answer yes, then hey, real estate might be your next big move. Realtors help people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives, buying or selling a home, and no 2 days are the same. It's a chance to grow a business, make an impact, and build the lifestyle you're working towards. Visit realtorsrealestateschool.com to set up a free career consultation. Chicago is a very opinionated city, and we're going to let people know. When we last had this conversation, we talked about the things people have to have thoughts on, whether it's the winter, the weather, food allegiances, what high school you went to. Emmy, what is something that most Chicagoans have to have an opinion about?
I feel like when I ask someone whether or not they have a car, whether that is shouldn't even be an opinionated thing, it's yes or no, but it always sets off kind of this broader conversation, whether someone's defensive and loving having a car and all their speeding tickets, or if they're like me and they're a professional pedestrian. And I think there's a lot of pedestrian pride in Chicago, although maybe that's just among my friend group because we just probably can't afford cars. And I just think that you totally can be carless in Chicago. I've been doing it my whole life. I was getting around growing up before Uber existed, and I didn't have a smartphone until I was away at college. And the truth is, I don't even really remember how I was getting around sometimes, but I was getting there.
It was just happening.
It was happening, and obviously, Uber makes it a lot easier at night now. And we have way cheaper Uber prices than other major cities, so that's something people should remember too. And obviously, you can rely on the CTA, which is facing its own issues right now. That's always an interesting conversation when you're asking people whether or not they have a car. Everyone's got an opinion on the CTA. Everyone complains about it as is before the potential 40% service reduction, which is just looming over us like the Grim Reaper. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, that would, if no type of bailouts reached, it's going to be a lot harder to stay carless in Chicago. But I love it. Even just on Saturday, I was razor scootering everywhere. I went in the end 14 miles on it. And I'm actually still feeling it. I can barely move right now, but I went from I went from Logan Square to the beach by Fullerton and then to the salt shed. So I was like really making moves on my scooter and just hiding it in the bushes. There's ways you can even go, where you're not, if you're nervous about biking in the street, got to be careful. My friend got hit in Hyde Park the other day. Like, I get nervous about all that. So that's why I stay on the sidewalks. But I guess that's something I have an opinion about.
No, as someone who has pretty much traveled this city every way possible, from walking, running after a train, CTA, Metra, Pace, scooter, Divvy, my own bike, driving a car, no car. I think at some point this city ultimately gives you a transit personality. And it usually feels like there is love or hate, like there's no middle ground. Like you either love cycling or you hate cyclists. Like you either, like you said, love being a speed demon, moving through traffic, or if you have a car and you aren't those things, you hate it. All you can talk about is how traffic is bad and there's always construction, how you don't know any of the back streets, how GPS is always messed up, how Lower Wacker is so scary. You either, the city is extremely walkable or it's way too big and way too inaccessible, and bike lanes are terribly ineffective or inconsistent from ward to ward. It feels like at some point you end up, as you saying, you can just ask a person how they get around the city, and the way they communicate it can really tell you like exactly where they fall on the transit spectrum. I have friends who would never do anything but drive. We could be going 5 minutes away. They're driving.
And it's good to have those friends.
100%.
Need them.
Rick, what is that subject that you think most Chicagoans end up having thoughts on?
So I think the classic opinion that every Chicagoan has is something about the mayor. And more often than not, that opinion is, of course, negative. What's interesting to me about like Chicago politics is I think this relatively recent notion that if you don't like the mayor, you can actually get rid of them. Because if you think back to like the Dailies, who were obviously these unmovable objects, but even beyond that, like some of the most famous mayors in Chicago history were like had to end their terms because they died in office. I'm thinking of Anton Cermak and Harold Washington. And even like Rahm Emanuel looked like he wasn't going anywhere until, the whole Laquan McDonald scandal just forced his ass out of town. But like, there's this like history of the mayor being this intransigent force that's just like baked into the Chicagoan self-consciousness. And like when that happens, I think it becomes like cursing Zeus or whatever. Like any minor inconvenience in your head could be chalked up to this weird ethereal power that like is sort of outside your control. But like I said, it's kind of beginning to change. Like Lori Lightfoot's election was characterized by this weird rejection of machine politics. And of course, our current mayor, Brandon Johnson's election came at a time when, like, I feel like as a city, we were maybe less hyper-focused on local issues and more reacting to a larger political climate and Trump and stuff. So maybe that's changing. But to me, either way, you have to have an opinion about the mayor and City Hall in general.
Yeah, it does feel like the executive branch at large is like more susceptible to the one-term cycle. We're in our third one-term presidential cycle, despite it being his godforsaken second term. Right, Mayor Lightfoot, the first one-term mayor in quite some time. Will Mayor Brandon Johnson win a second term? There's something to be said about the mayor, and so what interesting though is as critical we can be, but the way people romanticize parts of their administrations in the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And largely to criticize Brandon Johnson. Like some people will say, oh, at least Lori Lightfoot leaned into being, a little difficult to work with, or Rahm Emanuel kind of, stood on business when it came to getting his agenda through. Like people will quickly romanticize a mayor.
I think either way, like the strong opinions people have at least points to like a degree of political involvement you see in this city that like I'm not sure is reflected elsewhere. Like I'll never forget when I visited a friend in Denver and like I asked him who the mayor was and he didn't even know, you know, and it's like I that just is so perplexing to me. Like you don't know who your mayor is? I don't know. It just maybe, you know, charitably speaks to the history of political involvement in this city, you know, for better or for worse, of like the machine such as it is and was. But yeah, you know, you gotta have something to say about the mayor. And I too think that like when the dust settles, people will look more charitably on Brandon Johnson.
Yeah, I think to this day, my family still has like a picture of Harold Washington hanging in the house
Right.
within inches of a
Wow.
picture of like Black Jesus. Like it's a staple in households. Like you feel some way, even if it isn't about this current mayor, you have some sense of how you feel about one of the mayors in Chicago history. It's including the old people like, I wish we went back to the Daily days. All right, so we talked about things Chicagoans have to have an opinion on, our number one essential or unwritten rule. And we're going to finish out about what's something Chicagoans hate by default that we learn to hate, we love to hate, or even the origins of why we don't mess with it are lost on us. Rick, what is something that Chicagoans end up hating, something that when you moved here, you eventually adopted it as your own?
So I think this is a little nebulous, so you'll have to bear with me here, but I don't think Chicagoans like change or new things. And my reason for saying that is like, and again, I'm, you know, stay with me here. I think Chicago had its, you might say, glow up like 150 years ago, right? When it was the new kid in town, the golden boy of the American frontier west and the nexus of American industry, you know, outside the East Coast. And that, you know, it was the time of the Sears catalog and Marshall Fields and just things being invented and created and redefined, like, you know, just like it was Chicago's degree of influence at its absolute apex, right? In the time since, you've sort of seen other cities and regions become the belle of the ball, you know, between LA overtaking us in population a long time ago to this annoyingly persistent boom in the Sun Belt we all have to hear about all the time. Like, I think we have this subconscious chip on our shoulder about that, you know, because we used to be the ones kind of like setting a new standard and you know making headlines and things like that. But now we got to worry about the budget and the pensions and the construction's always taking longer, and it's just all this stuff that kind of feels downstream of not being top dog anymore. And on top of that, you got these transplants and influencers and all this stuff. And the bars in Wrigleyville play country music now. Like I don't know, I don't like it. And I personally am suspicious of anything new because why would anything new be good? And I don't think I'm alone in that.
I hate change, and I was raised to hate change by
There we
two
go. Thank you.
parents who hate change, who were raised in Chicago by families that hate change.
Thank you
No-
for bringing some native bona fides to my point.
Nothing has changed in our home for my entire life. Nothing's changed in our neighborhood around Bryn Mawr in decades.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
you know, I think of course there is a dark side to that history, right? I mean, in Chicago specifically, like the unwillingness to change has been, I think, a black eye on our city's history in many ways, and continues to be, quite frankly. But I think you know, regardless, just again, just the legacy of segregation and how it continues to reverberate in like every corner of civic life in ways that you would never even expect. So I think it is, you know, in many ways an ugly thing that we need to continue to grapple with. But at the bottom line is, I don't think Chicagoans like change.
Amy, what is something that you think most Chicagoans hate by default?
I hate explaining Chicago. Like I said, I lived in New York for college and I was always explaining, no, yeah, it's actually a really big major city. Yeah, we actually have a lake, we have a beachfront. And then it sets off this weird, I guess this is personal, but it sets off this weird defensiveness in me. And the next thing I know, I'm like ranting at a party, which is not, I don't want to be that guy. And then living in Chicago makes you that guy. And that's just something I hate. And I was asking people about it last night. I was at a barbecue and they knew what I was talking about. So I don't think I'm alone.
No, our initial in our initial conversation, we talked about ingenuine opinions about safety or violence, comparing us to New York and the suburbs. We kind of fleshed out some of our suburban hate. But it all kind of goes back to this, like this, we're tired of explaining Chicago to people. We're tired of the comparisons of Chicago to other places. We're tired of having to explain, oh no, you should go to the neighborhoods, understand the history of the neighborhoods, the root causes of violence. Like we're tired of explaining what feels to us at this point like very simple concepts of what it means to live in our city. But anytime I'm watching someone not from Chicago talk about it, I'm both reminded to have a little bit of patience that I don't know anything about Phoenix or anything about the broader like cultural landscape of Boston or Orlando. But I also don't feel like I feel like Chicago is so obsessed with Chicago that we don't spend our time having opinions about other places in the same way. I have an extreme defensiveness about the city when I'm in other places or when I'm in other cities in the country or I'm around the world and I say I'm from Chicago, 90% of the people have some type of reaction to that news. And their reaction teaches me a lot about what they think about Chicago. And their wrong reaction just immediately sets up the version of me that is like, all right, we finna box because
Yep.
I do not like how you took that in. It's like, from Chicago. Oh, Chicago. Like Chicago. I'm like, all right, come on, pull over, pull over. My last thing, I think uh that a lot of Chicagoans hate. And I hope that this doesn't come off as some like vague, cocky support of like hustle culture, because that's not what it is. I'm not telling everybody to like go get a side hustle or go like pursue the artist inside of them. But a part of me is when I say that I think Chicagoans hate folks who are not willing to like DIY something, to like hit the pavement for their vision. Like, I think I said it earlier, Chicago has some big main character energy. And I think we really support people putting themselves out there. I have watched people go from jam sessions with a bunch of strangers to playing on some of the coolest stages in our city. I've watched people who just were like, I want to try stand up, to like go out and hit the like 2 a.m., 1 a.m. stand up and kind of find their way. I've watched people put on like vampire musicals and build their own storytelling shows out of the basement of a theater with a much larger theater to ultimately playing on that main stage. Like I've watched people come back from the army and go to film school and are now legitimate filmmakers in the city, photographers who you can just walk around this city with a camera. And I promise you, you do that enough times and somebody will be like, oh, you take pictures? Oh, you like taking pictures? Oh, I got an event. Would you like to come take some pictures at? Like there is there I understand like jumping, like coming off that ledge of figuring out like what do I do next? Like what does my content look like? Or where's my community? Or, how do I find other hobbies to pursue or break into an artistic scene? These are very daunting questions. But I do think Chicago has a frustration with people who are either like flogging or like faking it, in the sense that they are constantly just talking about the obstacles and the things that stand in between them and trying something, and a frustration with people who are unwilling to do a little bit to try. And again, I think that it isn't just for people who are artistic in nature. Even people who are like, oh, I want to give back in a way, or I want to volunteer, I want to do something. You can go do it. There are a number of people out here willing to take in your time, your resources, build community, and learn with you. I'm not saying all of that is not the same as saying it's easy to make friends in the city or it's easy to find the perfect network. But I do think it is very easy to like feed yourself creatively and as a human being, if you have the time outside of like work and just trying to survive. And there are a lot of artists in this city who are both trying to just get by, survive to the next day, and also building some really beautiful like work along the way. And I think over the last 10 years, I'm still trying to find my way in this whole scene. But the one thing that's been clear to me is there were so many small opportunities for me to just like get up in front of people and try things. And I think this city's spirit of that is still very much alive.
Yeah, I think Chicago's got a bit of an underdog persona sometimes, but it doesn't take long for people to realize, like, no, we got the big shoulders, right? Like, that's all of us, like, I think that energy is not hard to pick up on, and people recognize that. So, no, I agree with that completely.
Amy, you were going to jump in?
Oh, I just totally agree. And I felt so nurtured growing up here and learning to write. I mean, like, I did slam poetry in high school, and there was slam poetry tryouts and competitions. Like, that just doesn't happen in other places. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have been able to go explore those kinds of passions in college, honestly. Like, it just was, I totally took it for granted. I'm like, yeah, like, slam tryouts are Tuesday. But that's not normal.
I want to give a huge thank you to our guests today, people who help make CityCast Chicago and Hey Chicago what it is. That's our Hey Chicago newsletter editor, Emmy Mack.
Thanks, Jacoby.
And our social media manager, Rick Homuth.
Appreciate it.
Before we get out of here, please bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can subscribe to our daily newsletter, find all of our social links, read our articles, which we're updating almost every single day, make use of our neighborhood and walking guides, check out our latest podcast episodes, and so much more. Some good news. Tonight, we've got Argyle Night Market in Uptown. Tomorrow begins the weekend-long North Halstead Market Days, and Sunday, check out this month's Maxwell Street Market. Yes, 3 days, 3 different markets. I got you. Links in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening, reading, making time for us. Whether you listen on 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, I don't even know if they got 3 time, but if you are, why? Like, why would you want to listen to anybody talk that fast? You couldn't possibly be absorbing all this good information. But hey, I ain't hating. I'm just confused. I'm going to talk to you bright and early tomorrow. Peace.